Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about Snow White. Now, let me be very clear. If I'm talking about this today, it's because it has gone on long enough. Because trust and believe, it was never my intention or my real priority to discuss this because I think a lot of this is silly and overblown and just unnecessary at the end of the day. I think unnecessary is going to be a key word throughout this entire video. Anyway, I was minding my own business on Twitter, as one does, and I came across a compilation video wherein they show Rachel Zegler, the actress who is Snow White, discussing the movie. Now, and there's also Gal Gadot in some of those. This is exactly why I avoided talking about it, because I don't know if my opinions on this are going to be controversial, but I frankly am annoyed by celebrities making a big deal out of things that they have total control over and then whining about it. Honestly, let's just get into it. So, because I've been avoiding this, I found a comprehensive article about why there is controversy around Snow White to begin with. Also because once I started digging a little bit, there are all these theories about the rapport between Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler, considering that they are on opposite sides in terms of the Israel-Palestine. But we'll get to that later. But there is a lot of speculation just going on about their rapport. And you know things are about to get fucky if actors don't agree on such a key thing, especially behind the scenes. Snow White has been one of Disney's most popular movies since it came out in 1937, but the live-action adaptation starring Rachel Zegler in the titular role and Gal Gadot as the evil queen has been surrounded by controversy ahead of its theatrical release at the end of March. The Snow White remake has drawn so much scrutiny, Disney will permit only photographers and house crew at the film's March 15th premiere. So this occurred yesterday, the premiere. Now, let me just pause here real quick. Imagine a movie that hasn't come out causing such a ruckus and such a mess that you need to have a very specific group of people attending the premiere. If that isn't a flop in and of itself, like I don't even care about the numbers, which I honestly don't think are going to be good, but if before the movie's even out, you have to pick who can come to the premiere, I'm just going to throw out the idea that, hey, you might be inviting very biased people so you get very good reviews and people who might, look over all the backlash that there's been until now, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Anytime an audience is particularly curated, usually something weird is going on. Reducing the number of journalists in attendance who could potentially questions. Journalism is dead, guys. Anyway, the production has faced multiple issues, from criticisms over statements made by the movie's stars to debates over how the film portrays dwarfs. Here's a look at controversies facing Snow White in the walk-up to its release. The casting of Snow White. The idea of Zegler, an actor of Colombian descent, playing the Disney princess prompted racist backlash. The name of the movie is Snow White, okay? Conservative pundit Ben Shapiro said in a YouTube video published 6 months ago that boasts about 700,000 views. Backlash against Zegler intensified after some fans questioned her appreciation for the role when she called out some of the more sexist elements of the original Snow White story. In 2022, Zegler told Extra TV that the original Snow White has a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. In other interviews, she's talked about how the film is dated in terms of its representation of women in power, saying she approached playing Snow White as someone who would be dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, rather than as a character who is solely looking for her happily ever after. This, I fear, is where I'm gonna have to go off slightly, okay? Let's start at the very beginning. Her being of Colombian descent, honestly, it is called Snow White, that is true. In the story, as far as I recall, even in the Brothers Grimm version, as far as I recall, she's extremely pale. So, yes, it's not surprising that people would have commented on that the same way that they would comment on Snow White having blonde hair being not true to the text. But this is an old conversation. We see this with adaptations all the time. How true do you stay to the original story, and where do you take artistic liberties? Honestly, with where we're at right now, I don't really think this is an issue. We have far bigger issues at hand. Putting that aside, her appreciation for the role is zero. It's null. Now, I'm going to insert a clip in a second once I'm done low-key raging about this, but her appreciation for the story generally seems to be a zero, which also makes me question, why would you accept a role for something that you clearly are not super invested in? Because if you're accepting a role on the premise that they're going to adapt it exactly the way you want it to be adapted, I'm sorry to say, that's Delulu. If everything is based on making Snow White a boss bitch, you should have asked about that. But considering that back in the day, back when the Brothers Grimm wrote the original version, back when the cartoon came out in 1937, girlies were not wearing blazers and working in corporate, okay? So let's remember the time and the context. Also, just as a refresher, this is a fucking fairy tale, okay? So it's not that deep, first of all. And second of all, the context does matter because we're talking about, first of all, a made-up world with poisoned apples and witches and all this shit. So really, reality doesn't have much of a bearing in this world, if you ask me, because again, oh yeah, it's a fairy tale, but also historical context. When it was written will determine what characters do, right? Back in those days, women often were homemakers. Okay, that doesn't make those women inferior though, which is also why I have a bone to pick here, because this is probably going to be the same Rachel Zegler who, I can't confirm, but I'm pretty sure she is a feminist. If you really are a feminist, why are you out here undermining someone who just wants their happily ever after? What is wrong with that? There's some people who do want to go work in corporate, be a boss bitch, start their own brand, start their own whatever. That's fine. There's some people who want their happily ever after. They want to be stay-at-home wives and they want to have kids. The whole premise of feminism is that you get to choose and you shouldn't be judged for it. So, to undermine Snow White as a character, to be like, oh, she wants more than just happily ever after, it's like, what's wrong with just wanting what she wants? To me, it seems a little bit arrogant to be out here critiquing this fictional character as if they're real, which already in and of itself is a crazy sentence, but to critique them as if they have no value just being who they are without your special input. Here is the TikTok that came up on my timeline, which brought all this to my attention, blah, 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 blah.
No longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. I watched it for the first time in probably 17 years. The cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power.
So I'm just gonna break this to you gently, but you taking a role in a movie and then boasting about how you haven't watched the original cartoon in over a decade is not a flex. That shows that you're, first of all, under-researched, and why would you admit that? First of all. But second of all, it's also like, why would you slight a movie like that? Can you imagine I got a role in, I don't know, the shitty Harry Potter series they're gonna make? I got a role in that, and imagine if I said, oh, I've never seen Harry Potter, don't really care for magic, the books were pretty bad. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you think that adds? That makes you look bad, by the way. So I find this whole TikTok was interesting, and I'm sure there's more context to it, but I doubt that the context changes the general notion of what's being said. It's just insane to me. It's like a person joining a project and then just shitting on the project the whole time, and you're like, okay, why did you not leave? Why did you take this project? Why didn't you ask more questions? If you have such specific parameters about what you can and can't be in, that's totally fair. But you need to put that at the forefront and not just shit on the movie after. Also because it's gonna hurt movie sales. Because as much as some controversies will sell tickets, everyone I've talked to about this, they've seen this controversy and they're like, I want nothing to do with this. Let alone that I don't think that many people were interested in the concept of a Snow White movie to begin with. This all just made it so much worse. So really what she's doing here is she took a project that she hated, did the project, and now she's hitting on it again, so it probably won't even end up being a successful project. So really what you did is waste your own time and whoever's gonna go watch this hell of a movie, in the sense of hell, right? Also, I return to my main point. If she's gonna claim to be a feminist, you really can't be a feminist coming out here and also saying, oh, her goals are not valid. If your goal is to have a happily ever after, that's a valid goal. Why is that suddenly something that you can just shit on and then later be like, she has to be a boss bitch? Putting aside that it's a fairy tale and the historical context, it's like, why can she not want something else? What's the issue? The take went viral on TikTok, where NBC News reported users argued that not all female characters have to be girl bosses. Exactly, thank you. Zegler has stood by her comments. What an honor to be a part of something that people feel so passionate about, Zegler told Vogue Mexico for a 2025 feature. We're not always going to have the same feelings as everyone around us, and all we can do is give the best of ourselves. Okay, I mean, you're the one who caused the problem, now you're commenting on the problem, so go off, I guess. It's not just the casting that's been criticized, but also the whole idea of a Snow White movie in 2025. Some think a fairy tale that features 7 dwarves is politically incorrect, like Game of Thrones star Peter Dinklage. I was a little taken aback, Dinklage said on Mark Maron's What the Fuck podcast in 2022. He described the Snow White fairy tale as a fucking backwards story about 7 dwarfs living in a cave together, arguing. Have I done nothing to advance the cause for my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough. After Dinklage's comments, Disney told The Hollywood Reporter that it was taking a different approach with the 7 dwarf characters and consulted with members of the dwarfism community during the making of the film. In the film, Snow White is flanked by 7 computer-generated little people, a blow to little people who have aspired to the roles, according to Dylan Postle, an actor who is a little person. As he told the broadcaster Piers Morgan in 2023, I can't go for the Harrison Ford or George Clooney roles because that's not for me. These dwarf roles are for people of my stature. Now think about the additional stunt actors or body doubles. Now you're talking about multiple actors of my stature that don't get these major roles. Obviously here, I don't really have much of a comment because this is about the personal opinion of people in the dwarfism community. So that is what it is. I do think that it comes down to the individual. I didn't see one majority opinion. I will, however, say I don't think that CGI was the solution here. To CGI the dwarf characters in Snow White it doesn't solve anything, because if you're going to be offended about the characters that are dwarves, whether they're CGI or not, the story is what it is. So, you know, you can be offended, but the story is going to still be what it is. And I tend to agree with the latter opinion, Dylan Postle, what he was saying about taking away jobs from people who wanted these roles. And at the end of the day, if there are people from the dwarfism community who want these roles, who are not offended by the roles, I think it's unfair to deprive them of the roles because certain people in the public who are not part of this community are saying that it's offensive, right? Listen to the community, see what's going on, but also see if people that are part of the community want to be part of the project, because that in and of itself is telling, right? I'll limit my comments to that on this section. So this is another big one, and this is also why they're analyzing the body language and seeing how friendly, or rather unfriendly, Zegler and Godot are towards each other on red carpet events or any public event for that matter. So it says, Snow White and the Evil Queen are not only at odds in the movie, but also in real life, at least in terms of political opinion. The movie got caught in the crosshairs of the culture wars just as the Israel-Hamas war broke out on October 7th, 2023. Godot, who used to serve in the Israel Defense Forces, has been unabashedly pro-Israel, urging world leaders to do more to free the hostages taken by Hamas. More than a year into the war, in a March 4th, 2025 keynote speech at the Anti-Defamation League Summit, Godot announced those who are not condemning Hamas but celebrating, justifying, and cheering on a massacre of Jews. Zegler, who describes herself as pro-Palestine, has been outspoken about her views. After a Snow White trailer came out in August 2024, Zegler thanked her followers in a post on X and added, "Always remember, free Palestine." The two stars did appear at the Academy Awards on stage together on March 2nd, 2025, where they presented the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Both are expected to attend Disney's premiere of the film Friday, so just this past Friday, where all eyes will likely be following any interactions they have. So this, honestly, I feel like unless you're backstage and unless you see their interactions, you wouldn't really know how much this affected the acting, how much they let this quote-unquote get in the way of their job, because of course they are there to do a job, so you have to wonder how much will this get in the way. Also because of course, this is its own situation, but there have been other times where I know for a fact that actors have been on different pages politically, and if you don't get past that, casting becomes far more complicated for obvious reasons, right? To find people who are all on the same exact page. So for this movie, I'm assuming they got past that because the movie was completed. Now, whether it's visible in the movie that they're not friendly, which is the general rumor on the internet that they don't like each other, that they're not friends, I have no idea. I think the movie's going to be a piece of shit regardless. More controversy or less, this movie, in my opinion, is doomed. So I guess in the end of the day, it doesn't really affect things. So that's where this article stops. To me, a lot of this seems silly and unnecessary, and when I refer to unnecessary and silly, what I'm really talking about is Zegler taking on the role and then harshly critiquing the story that the role is supposed to portray, just because it seems not only unnecessary, but there's no solution. Like, you're presenting a problem, and there are solutions that you could have taken, but you opted to not take any of the solutions. Like I said, talk to the director first, see what direction this is going. Choose not to be in the project. All of these are solutions. You didn't take them. You go ahead with a project, then you shit on it, and you act like, what, there was a gun to your head? There was no gun to your head. You chose this project. So I really don't understand what she thinks she's doing. And honestly, there's a part of me that thinks that she thinks she's coming off as empathetic or knowledgeable, when in reality, a lot of this to me says, okay, you're under-researched, first of all, because you admitted that you haven't even watched this movie in well over a decade, which wouldn't be that big of a deal if you actually rewatched it with an open mind. But I don't feel like it was rewatched with an open mind, if it was rewatched at all. So there's that. So you're under-researched, and that's okay because your talent as an actress is not present on Earth. So I guess it doesn't really matter if you do your research because the result is the result. Aside from that, it comes off as disingenuous and honestly just ignorant. That's all I have to say about that. Now, if the movie ends up being a success, which would be a very big shock to me, that's great. But honestly, it is becoming tiring to hear these actors who are paid millions upon millions of dollars, who can pick what projects they want to be a part of, to then bitch about said project, right? Because also, I have to think, if a couple days in you saw the direction this was going in and you weren't happy with it, you could have left back then and you chose not to. So it's also the question of taking charge of things and not turning yourself into the victim of having to be in a Hollywood movie that pays you God knows how much money. What are we doing here? Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.